Let's revisit the Holbein Granulating Watercolors. This time, though, I'm enlisting my friends. Hi, Shannon Rowe Jackson here, also known as Caution Artist at Play, and today we are going to be taking another look at the Holbein Granulating Watercolors. If you saw my video from a few weeks ago, then you know I am a brand ambassador for Holbein, and that means sometimes they send me some of these supplies to use and get to know before I have to teach about them in workshops, and that's how I got these. And I also got permission from my contact at Holbein to share them with some friends, Lindsay Wyrick, Karen Clark, and Angela Clark, and I made them fun little mini palettes. We decided that it would be a really fun collaboration idea for each of us to choose a set and a theme to work from, so that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be working exclusively from the landscape set. I'm going to paint a landscape with it. And Karen is going to be using the flower set for flowers. And Angela's got a really cool moonscape planned with the moon set. Are you catching on here? And Lindsay's going to be doing something undoubtedly very beautiful with the bird set that will be bird themed. And so we thought this would be a great way for us each to play with the colors, and we just chose a set and a theme. So I will link their videos in the description below so you can see what each of those ladies came up with. But for now, let's just take another look at these colors and create a beautiful landscape with them. So this is the set that I will be using for this project. This is the landscape set. Let's take a look at these colors. We have Pampas Grass Yellow, Wonder Forest Green, Ocean Blue, Nightfall Indigo, Twilight Purple, and Daybreak Orange. And I have here an empty watercolor palette by Christy Rice that I filled with these paints when I last did a video about them. These are the colors that I'm going to try to use. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take those out of the palette so that I am not tempted to use the other colors in this palette. I want to use just these 6 colors. And I think it's going to be just a fun challenge to use a limited color palette and get used to mixing these colors to create new colors. And then I'm going to take them and put them in this little pie plate. I bought this recently because I wanted it as a mixing palette, and I just think it's so much fun. And so it'll be my first time using this as a mixing palette. Spoiler alert, I love it. I have my paper taped down and I am just going to wet it down. I am doing this on the Stonehenge Aqua Cold Press, just the 140 pound by Legion. I wet my paper down and then I'm coming in with my blues. And then I'm just going to use some paper towel to lift my clouds out. I'm just laying in a quick little sky, fun and fresh. This was a lot of fun. This piece really didn't take me too long. It was maybe an hour at most between letting things dry and then me being a little bit finicky about some of the details later, but you know, that's just life. But these lifted really, really well, and already you can see the way the colors are granulating in that sky. So beautiful. It almost gives it an even more sunlit kind of effect to it, almost like that sunlit haze. For the foreground, I mixed my Wonder Forest Green with my Pampas Grass Yellow with more of the yellow because I wanted it to be warmer in the foreground. And then for the grass that's further back, I added successively more and more Wonder Forest Green because that was a little bit on the cooler side. So you're going to see a mix of different greens here, and it's all varying mixtures between the Pampas Grass Yellow and Wonder Forest Green, occasionally mixing in a little bit of the Ocean Blue or the Nightfall Indigo to get it a little bit bluer in the areas that I wanted it to be cooler. And then I did something very similar for these background trees, but this time I added a lot more of the Nightfall Indigo to give it that kind of, you know, bluish tint to it. And they mixed really well. And you can really see there, I'm working wet into wet at this point. And when you work wet into wet this way, you're going to have those fuzzier lines and you're going to have a lot more of that granulation. As I work up my details, I'm going to use less and less water so that I can, you know, keep the fine lines a little bit harsher. And so you're going to see a little bit less of that granulation, but it's still there. So here for this more foreground tree, I want there to be a lot more contrast and I wanted it to be quite dark. So I went with a mixture of my Nightfall Indigo and my Wonder Forest Green with Pampas Grass Yellow. And I actually mixed in a little bit of the Daybreak Orange as well to get that kind of sap color. And I'm not going for a perfect mixture here because trees aren't perfect. You're going to have the sun hit them in certain ways. There's going to be different colors in them anyway, depending on the light. You will also see me go back and forth with different kinds of lifting techniques. Now, the most difficult part of a challenge like this is to get darker colors. And so in the areas where I wanted a lot of darkness, I used less water to get more of that saturation. And then I added more water for the areas that I wanted them to be lighter once I came up with this sort of sap green mixture. Now, for those trees in the background, I added a little bit more of the blue. Again, I wanted them to recede behind this main foreground tree, but they did have a little bit of sunlight in them, and I wanted to separate them a little bit more from the trees in the background. So I did come in with my Pampas Grass Yellow and do kind of a halo around them, and I thought that was a lot of fun. So I was really being very playful with my mixtures and being playful with, you know, the effects that I was going for. I really wanted to bring out that granulation, and so sometimes I would mix the colors together, and sometimes I would just butt them up against each other and let them flow together to get that fun granulation effect. And then I'm just going through this with a very similar mixture and putting in some more of the bushes that are separating the different planes here, because there are some hills and different planes of existence within the ground. And for some of the plants that are closer, I added more of that Daybreak Orange, which is really kind of a brown color. And so warmer colors pull forward, cooler colors recede, and that's a great way to show distance in your landscapes, along with scale, obviously, and vibrancy. If you have something that has higher contrast in the foreground and is a little bit more vibrant, it's going to come forward better, which is why I put my darkest darks in that foreground tree. And then for the receding trees, they got lighter and lighter and more faint and more blue. And then I really wanted it to feel sunshiny, so once my foreground was dry, glazed some of that Pampas Grass Yellow over it to bring it forward. And I wanted the sunlight to come out as well, so you'll see me lift it in areas of the hill to make it feel like the sun is peeking through those clouds. And now that the trees are dry, I'm going back and forth between all of them to add a little bit more detail and create a little bit more texture. And this was really, in my reference, these trees were really more silhouetted, but I wanted to bring in a little bit of the sunlight peeking on them. So you're going to see me go back and forth quite a bit in this tree, adding shadow and then pulling out highlight, adding shadow and pulling out highlights. And this is a really strong paper for that. It takes a lot for things to get overworked on this paper, though, you know, I overworked it a little bit because I am a sucker for detail, but that's just my type A personality coming through and not really an issue with any of the materials here. And then I also had added in a little bit of water to bring out some highlights in those background trees, and it kind of created a little bit of that cauliflower effect and brought out the granulation even more, and I thought that that was a lot of fun. Overall, this was a really fun project. It's really small. It's only like a 5x7, but it was a great way for me to get to know this set really well, and I was able to mix all the colors I needed for a nice classic landscape. And I am using a reference photo here, but I'm not trying to be exact. I'm really just trying to get more used to these paints and play around with them. This was a random reference that I took from the passenger seat of my car while my husband was driving through the countryside here in Maine somewhere. So the reference itself wasn't perfect. It actually had some window glare and things like that, but it still worked well for a nice classic summer landscape painting from Maine. And these colors worked out great. I was able to mix whatever colors I needed, even though there's really only technically one green in this set. I was able to mix the varying greens that I needed to create the different effects in this landscape. And the blues were perfect for the sky. I actually used both the ocean blue and the nightfall indigo. The nightfall indigo feels very much like a cobalt color, which is perfect for skies. And then as it got lower, I used the ocean blue, which was a little bit lighter, a little bit more of a cyan, to bring out that warmth and they worked perfectly. And it's harder to see here on video. Some of the detail gets a little bit washed out with the studio lighting, but there is more varying blues in the sky than what you can see here. And then I just brought in some Q-tips again to lift out some more of that detail. And I'm just going through with very little water at this point to add the detail. But here's a close-up so you can see the granulations. In some areas, like the ground, it's a little bit more subtle, and then it's more obvious in those background trees. And this is what my heart palette looks like. Look how pretty those colors are on the palette, the way they mix together, and the separation of colors even within the different specific colors that come in this set is so much fun. I had a blast with this. This is what it looks like finished, and this is a scan. It doesn't really bring it out as much, though you can kind of see that varying blue now. These are available at Blick now in sets, so I will link those in the description below. And I will also link my besties videos so you can see what Karen, Lindsay, and Angela all come up with the other sets. I am so excited. All right, thank you so much for watching. This was so much fun. I love these paints. Every time I use them, I love them more and more. And I am very excited with what I came up with. And I love what the girls came up with as well. So make sure you watch their videos because it's incredible. And give them a like and a subscribe if you're not subscribed to them already. Show them the love. They deserve it. They're wonderful. I love them. I think you will too. All right. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this. I'll see you next time. Bye.